All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our today's session. So it's a pleasure to have each of you joining us from different parts of the world. This is Arash Aghajani. I'm a Microsoft MVP and community leader from Vancouver, Canada. And so today I'm going to kick off our November and December sessions. So as you see here, we have lined up 5 sessions with 5 amazing speakers for November and December. Actually, in the first half of the November, the speakers were present actually at various events. And we prefer to merge the November and December session together. This session continue until the mid of the December, and due to the end of the year holiday, so we will not have any session in the second half of the December. So today we have a special guest, AJ Ansari. He is Microsoft MVP and COO at DSWI. So we are fortunate that we have AJ at our today's session. So we are going to learn a lot of things and some great things about the AI, Copilot Studio, Azure OpenAI, and how we can build a chatbot using this platform. So before adding him to the stage, I'm going to I'll introduce a little bit about the Microsoft Learn community. The Microsoft Learn community offers various ways for learners to connect with peers and experts to enhance their expertise and achieve career goals. It includes the Microsoft Learn Hub for update and discussion, and learning rooms for direct engagement on specific topics, actually. The Power Platform Learner to Leaders is one of the Microsoft learning rooms, which has more than 2,000 members. We are sharing the latest information about Power Platform in our learning room, and also conduct this series of session every Saturday for Power Platform enthusiasts. So if you are not a member of this community, you can join us through this link, aka.ms/join PPLTL, Power Platform Learner to Leader. And the last but not least slide here is Code of Conduct. So the Microsoft the Microsoft aims to empower everyone globally through knowledge sharing and events, ensuring a respectful and inclusive environment for all. Harassment or degrading behavior is not tolerated, and everyone is responsible for upholding these standards. The Code of Conduct encourages awareness, friendliness, respect, openness, understanding, and kindness. So before we begin, a few important notes here. Like ever, if you have any question during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat box. We will have a dedicated Q&A session towards at the end. This session is being recorded for those who couldn't join us live, and will available shortly in Power Platform Learner to Leader YouTube channel. So that's all at my end. I'm going to invite our guest today, AJ Ansari, to this session.
Thank you very much, Arash. Let me turn my camera back on.
Sure.
I appreciate the opportunity.
No, thank you so much for doing it. us today. So a stage on yours, and you can start your presentation by introducing yourself. Let me, can you please share your screen and I add it to the stage?
Yes, I can. Give me 1 second. I'm about to do that right now.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and do that.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
So first of all, thank you very much, Arash. I appreciate the opportunity. I think I've known about what you're doing for quite some time, but this is my first appearance on the Learner to Leader Power Platform series. So hey, that's one more off the bucket list, right?
Yeah.
So today I'm going to be talking about a topic that comes up quite a bit within the community, because I think the conversation around creating chatbots or copilots or agents that's been going on for the last year and a half in great zeal, with great zest. But there are a lot of different tools. And I think the one that most people go to is, what should I use if I'm going to be making my own chatbot? What are the pros and the cons, or what's good about this platform versus that platform? And certainly there are many more platforms than the ones I've got listed here. But I thought, in the context of the Microsoft ecosystem, it would be a good idea to compare two contenders from the Microsoft ecosystem and one from just outside the Microsoft ecosystem, or what I would call Microsoft adjacent. And so naturally, Copilot Studio, which is entirely from Microsoft, the Azure OpenAI service, which is again from Microsoft in collaboration with OpenAI, and ChatGPT's the ability to build custom GPT, kind of bots, if you will. And so that is by OpenAI, but as many of you know, OpenAI has a significant amount of investment from Microsoft. So this is something that Microsoft has a great interest in, and as you'll see in our conversation today, there's quite a bit of overlap. So before I get too much into the presentation, a little bit about myself. My name is AJ Ansari. I am the Chief Operating Officer and one of the ownership partners at a Microsoft partner called DSWI out of Houston, Texas. That's where I live. And I am fortunate to have been a Microsoft MVP in business applications since 2018. I am easily reachable on LinkedIn. My email address is here, but typically I would say the best way to engage with me and have a conversation with me about this presentation or about any of the topics that I'm greatly interested in, that's on LinkedIn. So that QR code you're seeing up there and the bit.ly short link, both of them will take you to my LinkedIn page. When I am not working, I'm a huge fan of Formula One. So if you enjoy Formula One as well, reach out to me about that. We can talk about that. But of course, I find myself quite a bit interested and quite engaged with all topics AI and Copilot. As a matter of fact, next week I'll be at Microsoft Ignite. I am fortunate to be one of 20 MVPs who were invited to do theater sessions at Ignite. And mine's going to be on Tuesday on building better bots, or basically best practices around building your chatbots or agents with Copilot Studio. I've also got a blog and a YouTube channel coming up shortly called Only Copilot Fans. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be onlycopilotfans.com, and you'll be able to find it on YouTube as well. And so that's going to be more tips and tricks that I'd like to share from both personal experience, from helping others, and as Microsoft releases new things and features, it's another facet and an outlet to share my knowledge and my passions. So what I want to do today, so for context, I will give you a little bit of housekeeping slides, and then I'm going to give a very short demonstration of each of the three platforms that we're going to talk about. And then we will go into some nice differences. And then towards the end of the session, what I'll do is I've got one, kind of a when should you use what? And I've got each of those three contenders listed. And we'll do a little bit of whiteboard typing type of stuff, right? So you'll see some live stuff appear up on the slides as I kind of stream of consciousness give out some thoughts and suggestions on which platform might be a good idea. For those of you who are on live, and I know it's a Saturday, so maybe not a lot of you are watching this live, but for those of you who are live, I encourage any questions that you may have. If I can't get to those questions, find me on LinkedIn. For those of you watching later, find me on LinkedIn. So with that, let's get started. I wanted to put out a housekeeping slide because when I submitted this session, I think some words just weren't really kind of as commonly used. So agents, for example, were not really that commonly used, or wasn't really even a thing. And I use the word chatbot very loosely because it is, at the end of the day, even though these bots are capable of doing so much, at the end of the day, it is a chatbot. It is a natural language chatbot that we're building, where the user is going to type in your request, and they're going to get some form of response back. Whether it's searching through a document, performing a certain action, getting something translated, whatever it is that they are looking to do. At the end of the day, the mode of communication, if you will, is chatting. You're primarily typing that in. You will find too that in the coming months, you're going to find a lot of use of the word agent. It's almost I think we're kind of in a phase where we're, in the context of Copilot Studio at least, we're going to fast deprecate the word Copilot, and we're going to talk more about agents, because agents are essentially copilots that can do a lot of different things, a lot of different functions. But the word Copilot itself won't go away, because Microsoft has branded all of the AI experiences that they've built as Copilot, including the primary chat experience, the business chat experience, or the Copilot consumer, for personal use type of experience, where you can log in and kind of type and get some general information about the things you're looking to do. The other thing I wanted to highlight in my housekeeping slides is the Azure OpenAI service. I really debated if I should just, in comparison, say versus Azure OpenAI, whether I should say Azure OpenAI Studio, Azure AI Studio, and I want to give a little bit of context and commentary around that as well. At the end of the day, the service is what I ended up with, because the service is what is used for building the copilots or generative AI apps besides copilots. But it's built in the Azure AI or the Azure OpenAI Studio. Today, both the Azure OpenAI Studio and Azure AI Studio exist. They're not synonyms for each other. They're very similar, but a core difference is that when you're using Azure OpenAI Studio, you are basically working within the confines of the models that are typically OpenAI based. So the GPT models, then I think there's also some support for DaVinci and Babbage and so on. But they're working with about 20 models. When you're using Azure AI Studio, as I recall, memory may serve me wrong here, but there's over 1,000 models that you can really pick from, all kinds of models, including Meta's Llama and so on and so forth. But what I wanted to do is just kind of give a collective name for all of that stuff, and kind of use the word Azure OpenAI service. The third thing I wanted to highlight is, and this wasn't the case when I first submitted the topic some months ago, is that I said custom GPT as one of the contenders. Now, here I'm specifically talking about within ChatGPT, there is an ability for you to create your own custom GPT, and so you're going to be building it on top of your own service. Now, unfortunately, what has also happened in recent months is there is another website service type of thing that's out there called customgpt.ai. Frankly, I've not used it. I'm not sure what it's built on. I don't know a lot about it. That does not appear to be from OpenAI. So I want to be very clear. This is not what I'm talking about. So if that's what you're looking to evaluate, I would say you probably want to do your own research. But this is specifically in the context of ChatGPT. Now, everything that I have learned in kind of in these domains has been over the course of the last 12 to 15 months, if I'm being frank. I have been more engaged, in my experience as a Microsoft MVP comes more from the business applications area. And I've been more engaged with business applications and low code, no code type of experiences in the Power Platform realm. So I am not by education or by training somebody who comes from the world of AI, right? I'm not a data scientist. But I got on the train as the excitement built, first out of sheer curiosity, right? What they called rubbernecking. And then kind of, can I do it myself? Not really seeing any practical applications, but just for the building, chatbots for the sake of building chatbots. And then over time, as kind of the cases present themselves, I got more interested in trying to learn. And as I learned for specific cases, it pushed the boundaries of what I was trying to do. And really, that is where I started to run into, where one is too complex or one is too easy but too limited, and the third one's just right type of situations. And I'll give you a little bit of a kind of teaser for the end. There is no one is just right type of answer. It is always in the context of what you're trying to do that you will know what is the right solution. There isn't a one, this is right, one size fits all type of answer. But in the context, so in the kind of my journey, as I picked up the strengths and the weaknesses of the different tools, I thought this would make for a really good session to share with the community. I welcome your feedback. Perhaps there's things in here that I forgot to talk about that you would like me to think about in a future version of the presentation. Perhaps you disagree with me, and that's perfectly great, right? I love debate and I love conversation. So share with me why you agree or you disagree, or if you find the session very insightful, I would love to hear that as well. I think one of the things as a presenter you always want to know is, does your content apply to or relate to, or is it well received by the folks who are watching? So your feedback, good, bad, ugly, perfect, always welcome. So let's continue on. Our contenders, just as a reminder, are our custom GPTs with ChatGPT, copilots or agents with Copilot Studio, or copilots with the Azure OpenAI service. And within these three, what I want to do is take a few minutes and walk you through each of these experiences, right? We're not going to build full copilots from scratch. This is not a show me how to build a copilot or a bot session. But what I want to do, though, is certainly introduce you to and leave you with some idea of what that experience entails when you set out to build one. So what I've done here is shortcut a few processes. I'm going to jump straight into ChatGPT first, and I'm going to open up the part where I'm going to be allowed to build a custom copilot. So let's drag and drop this browser window over here. I'm in the Microsoft Edge browser. You see over here, I'm kind of in that part where I can build my own GPTs. So here I can see some other folks who have built their GPTs, and if I want to explore the ones that I've built before, I can. Otherwise, I go to create. The create experience is actually very simple. There's a kind of, you name your GPT, and so we could call it our learner leader GPT, and this GPT helps surface information from Microsoft Learn, perhaps, right? And you can give instructions. Now, I am actually going to not type in a lot of instructions, but if you are brand new to the concept of building chatbots, you cannot overstate the importance of instructions. It may just seem like something you're typing, and whatever you type doesn't really matter, but it does. Your instructions are always going to play into how this custom GPT, whether here or in the other tools that we'll talk about, will interpret and handle conversations, its ability to help, how it thinks of itself. Of course, these bots are not sentient, but within reason, within instruction, they behave in a manner they're told to behave. And so you could ask it to, in a very funny example that I'll give, I have an 11-year-old who I was teaching to build custom copilots with Copilot Studio, and because she's 11, she wanted her copilot to answer in a kind of, in Gen Z tone. So for a customer service bot, you may want it to be in first person. You may want to instruct it on how it's going to handle questions of a certain type. Should it answer questions of a certain type, and what have you. So if you are going to be building some chatbots, I strongly recommend that you take a little bit of time and watch some YouTube videos on instructions, watch some resources, go look online. Even on Microsoft Learn, there's in fact some pretty good instruction examples. So you would do that. And then you have what are called conversation starters. One of the challenges that somebody faces when they access a GPT as a user is they don't know what to ask, right? And it can be a very helpful thing if there's some example or sample questions. So starter prompts is something you may have heard of, or conversation starters, you can put them there. So if you're building kind of like, where can I, or how do I build a Copilot with Copilot Studio? or something along those types of lines. So that could be one conversation starter. Another one you see over here as I type them, it's going to, I'm going to say another starter goes here, right? And so another one, these will start showing up over here front and center. Then what you want to do is something that's called grounding in a knowledge source, right? Already, the ChatGPT large language model has access to a lot of general knowledge. But if you're building your own custom GPT, it's because you wanted to look at your information first before it starts looking at general knowledge. You want to build something that will specifically be grounded in knowledge sources that you provide. These could be publicly available knowledge sources. These could be private knowledge sources, etc. But you are going to either upload files, or you can kind of, connected. You can allow for some web search. You can allow for image generation and a whole lot of other stuff. And then if you would like to have some new actions, and so an action could connect to and gather something from a weather source or do some more stuff. So actions connect to external applications, right? Applications, web sources, APIs. And so you're going to be able to do this with JSON or YAML as schemas. So you'd be able to do that, build your own if you have to. And then if you want to do something else, like there's some additional settings to, if you want to use the conversation data in your GPT to improve models. Now, I will make one distinction here. I will come back to this again when I'm talking about kind of ChatGPT in detail, is that the experience we're using here is the public ChatGPT experience. And why that matters is it does not have what I would call or what Microsoft calls enterprise data protection. Oftentimes people will say, will my data be used for training a larger language model, a public model? This is where you can limit that ability, right? So use your conversation data or don't use your conversation data to improve the ChatGPT models. There's some ability for you to control that. And then at that point, you can start, you can create this, and you can decide if you're going to share this with everybody, or who has a link, or just for yourself, or put it up on a GPT store. And then you'd be able to kind of publish and start working with it. So this is a very quick walkthrough of how, for instance, ChatGPT would allow you to build your custom GPT. Now, I want you to contrast that a little bit with the experience that you'll get in the Copilot Agents Copilot Studio. And I'm actually going to open up my MVP tenant where I have some Copilot built in. So let's go ahead and launch copilotstudio.microsoft.com. And in this experience, as it comes up, you'll find that first, maybe you won't see this happen because my browser is already logged in, but it should authenticate me into my Copilot experience. So I am already logged into a Microsoft work or school type of an account. My experience starts off there, and there I can have what are now used to be called, Copilots are now called agents. I have one that's pre-built. I'll show you a little bit of that, and then I'll kind of go through and build one of my own as well. So as I mentioned before, my background is with Dynamics 365 Business Central. This is a sample, Copilot agent that I built for it. So when I built it, I have instructions over here. I have a description of what kind of the Copilot does. I have some knowledge sources that I've grounded it in, some information about myself, some information about kind of Copilot Studio documentation, the website, random learnings, and so I'll explain what this was for and what I did, why I did this, and some actions, just like we saw over there with ChatGPT, and then something called triggers, so we'll talk about, and topics. So if you were to create a brand new one, we'll briefly create one very, very quickly, right? We won't actually go through all the details, but we'll just talk about some of them and then come back to this one that's built. I can type and build what I want to do, but I would say that this is kind of your mileage would vary. So I'm going to skip to configure, just like you did with the ChatGPT here. You give your name for your agent, a description, the instructions, and you can ground it in the knowledge sources that you want. Knowledge sources being public websites, could be documents or files that you upload. For some reason, it doesn't let you add files right away when you first create your Copilot. After you've created and saved it, then you can add some files. You can connect to information within SharePoint and Dataverse. Now, if you're looking closely, one of the things you'll notice is SharePoint and Dataverse were not available over there in ChatGPT. And so immediately you can kind of identify that because this is part of your Microsoft Work and School account, you can have information that is very specific to your business. And this is all going to live in the protected bubble of your Microsoft 365 tenant. So SharePoint files securely available, things that are in your Dataverse, in Microsoft Graphs securely available, and permissions are going to follow the same way permissions follow for everything else when you're in there. So if you can't logically have access to a SharePoint file because your permissions don't allow for it, then the person requesting information wouldn't be able to either. Now, if you're building an action or a connection to an external application, to a service, you can also choose if you're going to have the Copilot author's permissions apply, or if you're going to have the user of the chat experience have your permission apply for the connection. And so you can control how that data is retrieved and the level of permissions or security that are going to be applied. So once you do create your chatbot or your agent, let's go back into one that was already there, right? So let's go into my agents. And as I pick up this BC Copilot agent that I have over here, a couple of things that are very unique about the Copilot Studio experience that you do not get with the ChatGPT experience is the ability to create what are called topics. And topics can be very helpful in orchestrating or guiding a conversation. In the GPT world, in the ChatGPT world, you are just grounding it in knowledge sources and actions. And anything that it needs, it's going to first look at those knowledge sources before it looks at its general knowledge, or it's whatever the LLM knows. And then if there's any kind of action or information you want to retrieve from another service, it will use an action. But here in the context of what I'm doing, I could have a topic that could be triggered by certain keywords that a user types. And these keyword examples could be things over here. These are my what are called quick answers or options, depending on how I set them up. And so somebody could select one of these and it could guide the conversation into different topics, if you will. I could also have some stuff in this particular example. I've created some things called seed questions. And so these seed questions are multiple choice questions that you're seeing over here. So I want to guide the conversation along. And I could say, this conversation, if the user doesn't know all the things that my agent does, they could kind of select one of these paths. And if they do, then I could also want to limit the sources of knowledge that it's going to pull this data from. So I could say when you're looking at Business Central, only pick information from these two particular knowledge sources from the larger knowledge sources guide. So topics can be very, very helpful. Now, what's really cool about Copilots, though, is in the most recent iterations, they are able to use generative AI to decide when to call what topic. So even topics could have what are called descriptions. So descriptions and information about it. And within those descriptions and information is what would guide the Copilot to know when to call what topic or when to use what knowledge source. Even knowledge sources is an example. If I want to go look at this, I have a description. So a lot is going to be guided and driven by the description concept. Lastly, before I start leaving the screen here and we go into the third contender, is this new concept of triggers. And triggers are very cool in that when you create your triggers, you could have some autonomous workflow take place. A lot of times, when you build a chatbot, we think of everything being triggered from somebody talking to a system. When you're talking, you may request an action to happen. You may ask for information to be retrieved. But the autonomous aspect of triggers could have information that comes in via email or something at a recurrence or a file being created. That can trigger a series of things to start happening and then also engage the human in the chat experience for some more guidance or feedback. And this autonomy is a very kind of new type of capability that Microsoft started adding to Copilot Studio. It's all the rage. If you're going to be at Microsoft Ignite, I strongly encourage you to kind of check out some of the sessions. Even if you're not going to be there in person, there's the virtual component of Microsoft Ignite they should consider registering for. And I think there's also some YouTube videos that are posted and are going to continue to be posted. So these are, this is a very quick walkthrough. And when we build these, we can kind of publish them into different channels. The Copilot, the Chat GPT experience would publish it into its own GPT store. But when you are working with Copilots, you can publish them into your website or into Microsoft Teams. Or better yet, you can actually publish them into Copilot from Microsoft 365. So if you don't know what I'm talking about the Copilot BizChat experience, for instance. So, by the way, I think I'm going to have to authenticate here. So let's go back. Here is what I'm talking about, this Copilot chat experience. And so in this particular experience, if you're a paid user, if you have the paid licenses for Copilot for M365, you can call the custom agents that you build. So if I go back to the screen very quickly, I can see in my library, I can build some custom agents. So I can say new agent, and this agent is going to be deployed straight into an existing Copilot for M365. So this is that other experience, the second of the three experiences. So let's take that away from the screen. And then that brings us to the third experience, building Copilots with Azure OpenAI service. And when I bring up the screen, immediately you will probably either be intimidated or in awe of the level of things you can do with it that you weren't able to do with the first two. So I won't say the first two are necessarily in an order of continuum of complexity. There's certain things that you can do, certain additional complexities you do have with Copilot Studio that you don't have with ChatGPT. But when I'm comparing features, you'll see there's places where ChatGPT can be better. But certainly this service to the right is the most complex of the three of them. I would probably say these are the low code, no code type of experiences. And this is the pro experience. I wouldn't always use the word code because you don't have to use coding, but this is the pro experience for sure. So let's bring up one of my other browser windows. Let's see. I think I had that up here. Now I've shortcut this process as well, but so I'm just going to go ahead and bring up. So I am in my Azure OpenAI Studio, and for context, I'm actually going to bring up one other thing here as well. And I'm going to add this tab right here. And this is Azure AI Studio. Azure AI Studio has 1,810 models at this time, everything from ChatGPT's various GPT models, DALL-E, and so on, all the way to Meta's Llama and Mistral, and so many more things right over here. This was Azure AI Studio. Compared this to Azure OpenAI Studio. When I look at its model catalog, it's a more humble 20 models, which in itself, again, is not very small. If you remember the other two that we were looking at, there was no selection of model. You as a user were not actually empowered to choose. You were at the mercy is probably a bad word, but you went with whatever model was pre-selected for you, right? So you didn't really get a lot of control in that process. But one of the things that you can do over here that you couldn't do in the other two is you can fine tune those models. So I can say, when I'm trying to deploy a model, let's say I want to deploy a ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. I can deploy this for a chat experience or for assistance, for other things that I'm trying to do. Or before I do that, I can start by fine-tuning this. So when I'm fine-tuning it, I can choose some training data that I want to upload some files or have some training data that's in an Azure blob. I can have some validation data that I use. I can set some parameters. And so I can essentially give it some additional training above and beyond what the default model is, some additional instructions on the model, some additional kind of train it with some additional data. That experience was not available in the first two, right? So that is by itself is kind of very unique. And then in that kind of chat experiences I have, you still have the ability to give it some general instructions and context. You can have your chat experiences, you're testing it. You can, if you have multiple deployments of models from the catalog, you can choose which model you want to try with and see which ones get you the best results. One of the things you want to know, and I talk about this in the detailed slides, is that each of the different models can have a different cost. And you will see down here, it says something about tokens. And so tokens are going to be how it costs and how it sees it. By the way, if I just want to kind of clear this out and start off from scratch, here I am in my, kind of a sample chat box here that I'm testing things out. Here are some sample test prompts that we have, or sample prompts or starter prompts that we have. And so, instead of typing something in, I could try this, and you can see this is going to use up 26 tokens. And when I send this out, as a response comes back, it can also tell you how many tokens were used up, 445 tokens. And the reason this matters is you're going to have different token prices. And so you want to know the bot that you're creating, what type of resource usage is it going to have? How much is it going to cost you or your organization to use it? And there's a lot more things that you can do with Azure OpenAI and Azure AI Studio that you simply cannot do. The flexibility here is absolutely immense. But what you can also see is it can be daunting because there is a lot more you have to do. I would certainly suggest that this is not one of those just poke around and find out. You'll probably want to do a little bit of kind of training, a little bit of kind of, watch some more YouTube videos, read some more documentation before you actually get to the part on finding all this, kind of using this. You can also get some information on things like embedding and completions. For those of you who don't know, as an example, an embedding is that vector representation of kind of, whatever your data or your information is. So, you can look at those types of things that you cannot in the other model or in the other tools that we have. So with that, let's turn to my favorite way of presenting information, which is I'll take one slide on custom GPT, and instead of giving you bullet points that overwhelm, I like to use these little boxes. So kind of like, each box will tell you one part of the story. And I have about 10 boxes for each, 9 and a conclusion box, and we'll kind of go through each of these. And when you're looking back at my slides, this will probably be a very quick, helpful way to summarize all of the things or many of the things I've shown in my demo, but also some things I may not have talked about in the demonstration. So custom GPT, this is built on ChatGPT. The developer is OpenAI. The custom GPTs are going to be building are built on ChatGPT's large language models. So it's kind of right there within that framework. You're not getting to choose it. It's going to choose it for you. You have the ability to ground your custom GPT with your custom knowledge, and you can build some custom actions. And what's cool about it is you do have the ability to allow your chatbot to search the web. You get to choose, is your custom GPT going to be able to search the web for some information? Is it going to be able to generate images from DALL-E, etc.? Is it going to be able to do code interpretation or analyze data, right? Will you allow for it to do that? Will you allow files to be uploaded for that to happen? And then one nice feature over here is in-conversation memory. And so what I mean about that is when you are typing and you are engaging with the chatbot, every time you have a conversation, on the left-hand side in a panel, it will save every single conversation. You can delete those conversations. Those conversations are only saved, by the way, if you're logged in and you have an account. But that allows you to go back and reference. And one of the cool things is, because you cannot train a custom GPT, having a memory or having in conversation memory gives you sometimes an adequate replacement for the lack of training. And what I mean by that is, if you consider some instructions that you've given, you said, hey, your name is Bob. Every time I ask you this question, you are going to reply with a certain type of answer. Or better yet, let me put it this way. Your custom GPT may not know anything about your organization. So you might be building an agent to help your employees answer questions about your human resources policy. So you may want to say, you are DSWI's, my company's, kind of HR agent. You're going to answer in the first person. Whenever somebody asks a question, you are going to refer to these knowledge sources. If somebody asks for information on this policy, and so on and so forth. So you can give all that set of instructions. Once you are in that saved memory, those instructions will forever be remembered. I sometimes use it for, answering. A good example I think I can think of here, I was just losing my train of thought. My marketing team had sent me a document that I needed to have filled out with responses. And this is what we use for blog generation. So my virtual marketing director creates blogs for our organization, And the blogs are created based on the information that we provide. So they have a blog questionnaire, basically, that asks what is the topic of the blog, what is the information that goes in the blog, and there's about 10 plus questions with all the information that they then use to ghostwrite the blog article. So the details come from us. Now, typically, I would have to hand type in all that information. And in ChatGPT, for instance, what I'm able to do with my custom GPT is to upload that file once, and in the saved in conversation memory, I've given it instructions to ask me each of these as one question at a time. And when it asks me one question at a time, I can answer that. If I have not answered adequately, it has been trained to ask me more. And ultimately, when all the questions are answered, it is able to create a Word document that I am able to download. And because Custom GPT, and I don't have that as one of the bubbles here, Custom GPT from ChatGPT does support what's called voice chat. I can actually talk to it from my phone app while I'm walking around, and I can give it the answers that it needs, and it can generate a document. And every time I need to do another blog article, I don't have to give it those instructions again. I just go to that saved conversation and I'm able to pull that up. So that is kind of a neat little thing that it's capable of within conversation memory. However, there are some weaknesses as well. So EDP is short for Enterprise Data Protection, just a fancy term for does it keep things within the confines of your business tenant? If you are running in a Microsoft 365 tenant, if you are a Microsoft customer, you probably have things in SharePoint. You're using Dynamics 365 for your ERP system or your CRM system, and you have some data that's there. You have your OneDrive for Business. You have your email that's in Outlook for Office 365 or Microsoft 365. All of those things are within the content, within your larger tenant. And then within that, you have some permissions. Your email is private to you. Your OneDrive for Business is private to you. The SharePoint files are typically shared across different people in the organization with different levels of permissions, etc. And so those things are all covered under enterprise data protection, right? And if you have conversations that you're engaging with, that conversation will stay within your organization. The data stays within your organization, etc. ChatGPT, by nature being a public and an external application, does not have that level of data protection. It does allow you to choose whether or not what you're engaging with is going to train its larger LLM that you saw in my example, in my demonstration, but it does not necessarily know and does not certainly keep that information within your tenant. Now, there is a different level of enterprise ChatGPT, and I'm not going to get into that because the cost for that is pretty prohibitive to do any of that. The other thing is with ChatGPT, among the three contenders, it has the loosest guardrails. And what I mean about that is you can search for more things, you can ask more questions. While it does consider certain morals and ethics, you can ask. There's probably certain things that it will not answer because they're considered in the gray area, harmful or inappropriate. But the limit of what it considers inappropriate or harmful is probably a little bit looser. It will, for instance, allow you to search about people or for people to some extent that the other tools won't let you do. So the guardrails, by and far, I find are the loosest in Custom GPT compared to the other two. It's great at RAG, so kind of the ability to retrieve the information from knowledge sources is basically the nice and simple way of explaining what RAG is. And so when you ask a question and that question has to be answered from a knowledge source, it is really good at using data in that knowledge source to surface the answer and kind of return that. By and large, large language models are not math models. So what they don't do well is they don't run complex calculations well. What they can do, however, is retrieve data that is stored in a document. And some are better at retrieving it from standard text documents. Some can do it from images or schemas, and so on and so forth, or sometimes even from audio documents and what have you. But compared to the other two solutions, what I have found, or specifically compared to Copilot Studio, I have found that custom GPTs built with ChatGPT do a better job of RAG with larger files. So if you have an 80, 100, 200-page document, it seems to return better answers, while Copilot Studio often needs to have these larger files segmented. and be able to kind of be controlled a little bit. Otherwise, the data I know is there, but when I'm asking the question, at times it can be frustrating because it's not always giving me the answer. And then I have to kind of play with it a little bit to make sure it kind of knows that and sees that information. Whatever you're going to create in your custom GPT, that's going to be either available for you or shared by link or published in the GPT store, so the larger audience of ChatGPT can access it. And to summarize some of the stuff here, I would say that this probably has the lowest learning curve. You can know next to nothing about LLMs and GPTs and AI, and still get something very quickly up and running. You don't need to be part of an organization. The subscription cost is pretty low with ChatGPT. I think it's probably as low as about $20 or so. It's the quickest time to value. And because you're doing these outside of the context or the framework of your organization, I would say it also has the lowest barrier to entry. But because it is outside the context of your organization, you probably need to ask yourself before you upload anything that is business sensitive information, don't do it. As somebody once told, kind of mentioned on another webinar, public tools like ChatGPT are great for asking questions, not for telling it your secrets. Don't expose your secrets. Don't tell it sensitive information, but it's great for asking questions and getting information from what it already knows. So that was our kind of 10-point walkthrough of the custom GPTs. Let's compare that to Copilot Studio. Developers, Microsoft. It runs on custom version of OpenAI GPT LLMs. So what I mean by custom version is, first of all, right now it's running on GPT 3.5, I believe 3.5 or 3.5 Turbo, but I think in preview or very soon we'll be getting access to GPT 4.0. And there are some other restrictions on this GPT model. So if you were to ask the same question of kind of, ChatGPT 3.5 and you were to ask the same question here in Copilot Studio with something you build, there might be some things that Copilot Studio's chatbot or agent will refuse to answer. And that's because it's a custom GPT version. It's not because it's weaker or not capable. It's often because of the extra guardrails that Microsoft has put in for, again, inappropriate, what it considers inappropriate content, what it considers not secure, etc. You can, of course, ground with your custom knowledge, both files, websites, Dataverse, SharePoint. If you saw in GPT, it was more based on files, not based on websites. One of the cool things when you're grounding things with your custom knowledge, and if you're using, kind of public websites, is it could be websites you own. It could be websites that are public, like learn.microsoft.com. And basically the way that works is it will just search within that particular website using Bing. So it's not crawling ahead of time. It's not kind of crawling, caching or anything. And when you ask a question and it needs to use that data, that knowledge source, that website, it's basically going to go and run a Bing search and only return results that come from that particular source. With your files, you can either put them directly as file uploads, which are going to be in Dataverse, or it's going to look at SharePoint folders and files. And so you got to think about not having, if you're going to use a SharePoint folder, for instance, as a knowledge source, you would want to be careful that you are not putting outdated information there or information that is not properly secured. So you don't have salary information with the wrong kinds of permissions or without any security and permissions. So think about all of those things. That's actually pretty important. Yeah. And then you can build really cool actions. Unlike what you had with actions in ChatGPT, when you're building actions with Copilot Studio, I didn't have a chance to go and show you a lot of this, but you can either use the Power Platform connectors. So the 1,000+ connectors that you get in Power Platform, you can use those. You can build and use Power Automate flows. You can build custom skills. The actions and the Power Automate flows, those actually don't need any level of coding or scripting. If you know how to build a Power Automate flow, you can probably very quickly and easily build actions as well. The beauty of these is that they will quickly be called and used to retrieve, to send data, to perform other types of actions, to do other aspects of automation within the context of what you're trying to accomplish. And so it could be your Business Central or your Dynamics 365 for sales, type of thing that you have an action running from, or it could be a weather service. It could be any number of things that you want to accomplish. And that gives a lot of flexibility to your Copilot or to your agent. There is, however, and I use the word limited web searchability, and let me explain that a little bit. Unlike ChatGPT's custom GPTs, where you could search it, select a box, and then it would allow for the user to search and retrieve information from the web, by default, anything that you build in Copilot Studio will not be able to do that. It will only be able to search a site that is listed as a knowledge source, or what is called, if you want to use what's called Bing custom search. Bing custom search, think of that as a private restricted search engine where you preset a set of a few different websites that you want to be able to search in. Could be, for instance, for your organization, you could have your company's website, some other publicly available resources. Maybe if you're a reseller of somebody else's product, maybe those kind of manufacturer websites so that appropriate information can be found. And then that larger custom Bing search can be used as a kind of a search tool. And it would, again, restrict your answers to only coming from there. But I can't start searching the web for other information like I can with ChatGPT. And that is primarily for your security. Now, there are ways to get past and beyond that. One of those is if you're going to create a custom deployment, a custom kind of model and deploy that from Azure OpenAI Studio or the OpenAI service, and then use that within Copilot Studio, that would allow you to do a little bit more. You have the added security of authentication. First, to create your Copilot, if you are an employee of an organization and your organization is tasking you to build a Copilot or an agent, they're doing it for a business purpose. By asking you to build this in Copilot Studio, even when you are gone or you're in a different role, the organization continues to maintain ownership of that because it lives in an environment in Dataverse. And so you can, it requires authentication to first create. And then when you're connecting to data sources, your data sources can have authentication. As I mentioned before, either the author's authentication could apply or the user's authentication could apply. And then when you're deploying to multiple channels, you can again decide if your agent is accessible without a login on a public website, or if it's in the confines of Teams or Slack or something else, or is it going to require a login to be able to kind of access that agent or Copilot. The pricing didn't really come into play on the ChatGPT part, but in Copilot Studio, because there you just sign up for the standard, kind of the Copilot, or rather the ChatGPT paid subscription. But here in Copilot Studio, first you need an authoring license, and that authoring license is about $200 a month, and that is going to give you a capacity of 25,000 messages a month. And messages are basically how it counts how much information is being used. So every question you ask is a message, every response is a message. If it's a generative AI message, it's considered 2 messages. And so when you extend that, when you exceed those, then you can buy additional capacity. So this is how when your bot or your kind of agent or Copilot isn't used, this is how it tracks how much it's been used. And what's really cool, and this is coming soon, so more on this at Ignite and in further conferences, you can build autonomous agents as I talked about. So those are, I think, the key highlights. It is low code, no code. It's got the strongest guardrails. And I wanted to keep the word short. I wasn't actually swearing here, but I would say some issues or aggravation probably with RAG on larger files. And so what I mean by this is when I have a much larger file, I can ask a question. And even though that information exists, I'm having trouble finding it. But the workarounds for that have often been by segmenting your file or using topics for orchestration of that information. And sometimes doing some pretty neat little workarounds. If you are at Ignite and you attend my best practices session, I talk about how we can kind of do some really nice workarounds to force it to see. If you were watching closely, and I'm only going to bring this back up for one quick second, if you were watching when I was showing the building Copilot experiences in Copilot Studio, I had a file in one of my agents called random learnings. So sometimes what I do is if it keeps making mistakes with RAG or it doesn't surface the right information, what I want to instruct and train it on, I put it in one separate knowledge source called, a file. Here I called it random learnings for improvement. And then in the description, I basically tell it to look at this file as a final check and balance to kind of, get information that is otherwise ambiguous or unclear or has previously been answered incorrectly. Let's go to our last contender. And this one's going to be a little bit quicker in the interest of time. Arash, just a quick question. Do I have a hard stop at the top of the hour, or can I go a little bit more, about 5 minutes or so more, and I'll tailor my presentation?
Oh, you can go ahead. No problem.
Okay, thank you. So then, yeah, well, I'll probably go about 5 or so minutes longer. So with the Azure OpenAI service, this is a Microsoft published service, but it is largely in collaboration with OpenAI. It has access to a lot of models. This is just kind of my shorthand for a lot. And you saw 20 in the OpenAI studio and over 1,800 in the Azure AI studio. You do have the ability to fine tune and train models, as I showed you. So you can kind of put in some training data, and you can have validation data, and you'd be able to do some more that you are simply not able to do with the other two tools. And then you have all kinds of LLMs at your disposal, not just all kinds of models at your disposal, not just LLMs, which are for natural language type of questions. There's chat completion, audio generation, text to speech, speech recognition, etc. Right? And so you've got a lot of different types of things that you can work with, a great amount of control that you can exercise. And then it's got embeddings. It kind of helps with chat with completions and a whole lot more. And it can allow you to, or restrict you to, search the web. So you have controls, just like you did with the Chat GPT. You can allow it or restrict it from creating images and so on and so forth. At every step of the way, you have controls. You do have the ability, within reason, to extend the guardrails. ChatGPT can be jailbroken, but they constantly keep patching it. So jailbreaking here is making it do things it's not supposed to be able to do. Copilot Studio, I found, is the toughest to jailbreak because the guardrails are so strong. OpenAI's or the OpenAI service, rather the Azure OpenAI service, actually gives you the ability to define certain guardrails and what it is or is not allowed to do. The pricing and the capacity, just like with Copilot Studio, you're going to be billed by usage, and so it's not the same way in messages. In fact, it's by tokens, and so it's as low as a fraction of a cent for every 1,000 tokens. And you can see, as I kind of went through a sample chat, how the tokens were being counted and it was showing you. This is actually, may seem scary, but it's actually very inexpensive. But some models are going to be more expensive than others. So GPT 3.5 or kind of 4.0 mini, some of those tend to be cheaper than some other complex models that are going to require a much higher fee. So you got to decide too, do you need access to the most expensive model? What, for the purpose of what you're doing, is a lower cost model going to do the job for you? It's also got the greatest flexibility in terms of deployment. So you can deploy it to a lot of places, including for use within something you're building in Copilot Studio. I would say, in summary, that it's got a steeper learning curve, right? It's probably the steepest learning curve, but it's also got the highest ceiling. And so that tends to often be one of the drivers. It's how complex or how powerful do you need your solution to be? And then you can decide based on that. Now, in conversation memory, by default is not available for chatbots that you create with the Azure OpenAI service, or not available certainly in the Copilot Studio. To some extent, I would say that if you were to deploy something you're building in Copilot Studio in Teams, because Teams retains chat, maybe that is a replacement for in-conversation memory. But otherwise, you're not going to be able to. If you deploy a custom Copilot, this custom solution that you built with Copilot Studio, let me go back a slide, excuse me. If you deploy an agent into Copilot for Microsoft 365, in that type of deployment, it does have in-conversation memory. So there's some nuanced differences that are going to be there. So what I want to do as I wrap up is when to use which platform. And so I've created this little kind of placeholder called whiteboard. And so on the other screen on PowerPoint, I'm just going to kind of type in some things, some thoughts out loud as I'm talking. So custom GPTs with Chat GPT, right? When would you want to use it? So I'm thinking out loud here, and I would say that if you are a kind of a single contributor, you're building something for own or public use, not in an org context, right? So you're not building it for business. You do not have a need for topic or conversation orchestration. Do not need access to to data in M365 tenant. And so here I'm thinking about things like anything in Dataverse or the Microsoft Graph, anything that's in kind of your SharePoint folders, things in your OneDrive for Business, emails. Because while you could potentially, with the actions and kind of the connectors that you can create, you could do some of this, the barrier for doing that is going to be much higher. It's just not natively going to talk to that. So if you don't need any of those, it's probably good. And if you want to build something that is just very flexible, I find things that you're building here are going to be extremely flexible because they can search the web, have the loosest guardrails. They can easily be shared with everybody out on the web. And it's just a very quick experience, as I said before, right? Quickest time to turn around. So that's where I think the custom GPTs with ChatGPT are really a good way to go. Now contrast that with Copilot agents with Copilot Studio. So where does this fit in nicely, right? So let's go and put in a few thoughts over here. If I am building something that is first and foremost for an organization, for an org, in an org, if I need this to be deployed to Teams, Slack, company portal of some kind, need to have auth control, right? Authentication control. Want to work with data in M365 tenant. This time I won't qualify all the different details I talked about. Want to quickly work with Power Platform connectors for actions. Want to orchestrate conversation. Low code, no code, right? So I don't want to have to write code. So in most of these types of situations, I'll be able to very quickly and easily use Copilot Studio, and it's secure. It is going to have guardrails. It is easy to work with. It does have a low learning curve, but it also, I think, in the three options, the most restricted. You will find, I think one of the hardest things that I had to deal with was early on in my journey when I found just kind of the issues or the frustration sometimes with RAG. It almost made me give up on it. And it was only through some more trial and error that I realized, hey, I could segment the files better. Hey, I could kind of create some additional learnings file for things that are ambiguous. I can do more things with topics. And as I understood that, I started to like it more. Because with ChatGPT, while the RAG part was better, what I realized is I have no control. I am kind of at the mercy. It's great that it works, but when it doesn't work, I have no control over it. At least with Copilot Studio, when something doesn't work, I have the ability to kind of work around it through the various things that are available, the various tools that are available. I will also say that Microsoft is developing and kind of improving Copilot Studio at breakneck speed. If you just look at the release notes for 2024 Wave 2, and the things that are coming in the following months, because not all features rolled out right away, and you look at the journey map and your roadmap, you're going to see there's going to be so much more improvement from almost week to week, month to month. So I find that if you're willing to invest kind of the time to learn Copilot Studio, and you don't have to get an author license right away, there is a free community developer license. If you're interested in that, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I forgot to put that as a resource slide over here. I'll give you that link, and you'll be able to quickly sign up as long as you have a work and school account, and you quickly be able to start working. And in fact, with no money out of your pocket, and start building Copilot. So I think this is probably one of the more nicer things, or one of the good benefits about Copilot Studio. And so then kind of wrapping up with the Copilots that are built with the Azure OpenAI service, right? When do we do this? And so the biggest thing I would say is, if you need the most flexibility, you need to pick your own model or models, right? Based on what you're trying to do. you need to define your own guardrails. I would probably say this is great for enterprise level projects, right? You have more flexibility, and cost is less of a concern. I wouldn't say it's not a concern, it's less of a concern, because you need access to Microsoft Azure. There's going to be some cost for the Azure resources, plus cost for the tokens. And then most importantly, you are willing to learn. Learn are a pro, because some of these things there's going to be a steeper learning curve, where you can very quickly start building things and deploying things with Copilot Studio and custom GPTs. I think that is not certainly the case with Azure OpenAI service. So that is kind of a very quick walkthrough of all of that. If you have any questions, we'll open up the floor to that. Once again, here's my QR code for my LinkedIn page or the LinkedIn bit.ly. You can email me as well. Arash, are there any questions?
Yes, we have a question here. Thank you so much. So super useful information and walkthrough that you actually prepared for us today. So it was great comparison between the different type of the GPT and AI solution that provided by OpenAI, Microsoft, and both of them. So yeah, it was excellent presentation here. So let me bring a question here from the Pune. So what is the limit of SharePoint sites that can be accessed by one Copilot Studio? It was 3 before, but is it still the same?
That some of those things are in flux. I think I'll go back and I'll have to check that. I can get back to you, but I remember there is more of a limit now within a specific topic. When I do if I say within a topic, I have some custom data sources or specifically pick those out, there's a limit on that. But there is certainly more than 3 that you can have for your overall Copilot Studio. That's for sure.
And also the same question for the Dataverse.
Here's what I'll do. I'm actually going to bring up Microsoft Learn, right? Because Microsoft Learn will always have the latest and greatest knowledge sources, Copilot Studio, because it's such a quickly changing environment. Here, I'm going to bring this up here, and we'll look at this very quickly together. So public websites, 4 public URLs, documents internal limited by Dataverse file storage allocation, SharePoint 4 URLs per generative answer topic note. So as I was saying, the limit is within the topics if you want to have a specific one, but otherwise, overall for your entire chatbot, there really isn't, or for your entire Copilot or agent, there isn't a limit. So if you are going to have it specifically pick out these 3 or 4 in the context of what you're doing, then there's a limit. Dataverse, 2 Dataverse knowledge sources, and up to 15 per knowledge source. So I would, bookmark this particular page, knowledge sources overview for Copilot Studio, and I would keep, checking over here. Sorry, I did not have these memorized, but at least it's good to know that I remembered 1 or 2 things off the top of my head.
Okay, awesome. So the next question here is from Musaheb. For developing agents which reads a user error of Business Central as a prompt, which solutions you will recommend to use?
Oh, that's a good one. I wish you were at Directions EMEA. There was a really, really good session that Waldo and Dimitri Katson had done on and copilots for telemetry. And I think I'll have to go back and see some of the recommendations that they had made. But if you want to go back and look there, because that is not a space I've done a lot of work in, I would imagine that one of the things that they're doing is looking through the telemetry primarily, right? And the telemetry will contain all the information that you need. And they're probably reporting on some of that. I don't know if they were doing anything autonomous, such as informing you by email when there was an error. I think it was more analysis of the error messages that had been generated over a period of time. That's a part I don't remember about, or don't know about how they handled that in your session. Now, there's more than one way you can skin that cat. I'm thinking out loud here. One of the things that you could potentially do If the Business Central error messages are coming, for instance, from an automation like a job queue, in that particular case, you could already with Power Automate, you were able to do something like create a Power Automate flow that would notify you within your Power Automate app or as a notification, your mobile app, or by email, what the details of that error was. So we could do that. Now with the help of triggers, you could do something very similar. So you could create something more autonomous where the trigger from kind of that failure point triggers something to be sent to you either as an email that could have something else happen. It could notify the user in your chat context, and you could have some human in the loop. What happens when an error takes place, right? What does a human do? Is there some other action that needs to happen as a consequence of that error? But I definitely encourage you to reach out to Waldo or to Dimitri Katson and see if you can't get a copy of their slides. If you were an attendee at Directions EMEA, you should be able to get that slide deck anyways from the Directions EMEA website.
Okay, awesome. So there is no question here, and I think that's there are several thanks message here. So it was a great session. Thank you so much. I know that everyone that it's a little bit over from our time frame, but it was a interesting topic and interesting presentation. So we would like that to continue this with a little bit more than the normal time, but it's all good. So if you have any question, please reach out to AJ, so through the LinkedIn or other contact point. So that hopefully see you again and in our next session next week. And thank you so much. Anything else, AJ?
No, thank you so much. It is such a honor and a privilege to be here on your webinar, and look forward to being here again sometime soon.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you soon. Bye.